We're back with another episode of the Eclectic Soundtrax podcast. I'm Vic, along with Mr. Skunk Manhattan. Joining us today is A.L.X. from the band Love Crushed Velvet. Thanks, A.L.X., for joining us today. Happy Father's Day. And we were just talking about you're heading to Europe at the end of the month, England.
Well, first of all, if I was going to England, the British would be very unhappy if I called them Europeans. At least like 52. All the ones that voted for Brexit would be very unhappy. Oh,
that's true.
But, I am heading to Europe. Well, first of all, great to meet you guys. And find out
pleasure.
the name. I got to find out the story behind your name in the next half hour. But so I'm heading to Europe. I'm not going to be in England, so I can avoid the uncomfortable position of calling the English Europeans and possibly getting my butt kicked in a. But I am going to be in Italy. I'm doing a very cool show in Naples, in this place called Maiden Cloister, which is this old cloister in the historical part of Naples that they turned into this art and performance space. So they invited the band to come over and do it, but not everybody can fly over. So it's going to be me and some local Neapolitan musicians who I've only met via email right now. So I get to go to Naples for a couple of days, rehearse with some of these new cats, eat some great pizza, and then going to be doing some small shows in Europe, some mostly unplugged or with some local musicians. So it's kind of all the songs are by and large written on an acoustic guitar, even though they don't sound like that when they're ultimately released. But it's these days you do whatever you can to get the music out there.
Yeah, I mean, man, that sounds really cool. Like, I love playing with those Italian Brits. Man, they're great people and musicians. Yeah, man, it's interesting you say that about writing, because I think a lot of songs are written like that. Sometimes it's a band, but oftentimes a single person will write a song with an acoustic guitar or a piano, and then the band, and then you cultivate and produce it. And but so often it comes from a simple chord, a few chords and a melody, and you build the song from there. So obviously you're the driving force. You are Love Crushed Velvet, and so you write. Do you typically write the songs that way? Do you ever collaborate? Or I think sometimes maybe you collaborate in studios or with producers and other musicians you're working with, or is it pretty much always you writing the songs and then working with other musicians, finishing them out and recording them?
It's really all of the above. A lot of my life is traveling, being on the road, so sometimes it's just me and an acoustic guitar. Other times it's being together with, I love collaborating. Some of the most interesting stuff, of course, comes out of collaborations. So a lot of times I'll work with other writers or just other instrumentalists. It's like, for me, it's super important to always be injecting fresh energy into the process, and sometimes fresh energy can come from some new experience or something that's stimulating you. But a lot of times the easiest way to get fresh energy into the process is just to bring somebody new into the room. And sometimes it's as simple as I'll start playing something, they'll start playing something. And I've been doing this long enough that most of the time we can come up with something interesting. Not always necessarily we want to put on a record. So sometimes it's me writing, sometimes it's collaborating, sometimes it's just jamming with the band and just really kind of before rehearsal starts, at the end of rehearsal, just seeing what comes out. Other times you get interesting ideas during sound check. That's like, if there's one time where you're completely unconscious about the writing process, it's during sound check. Because literally you're up there just blathering some stupid shit. It's ooh la la, doo da da, doo da da, dum dum bum bum bum, 1 2 3 4, da da da, and riffing off on something, and then the good drummer picks up on it, or the bass player picks up on it, and like 3-4 minutes later, you're like, hey, that was cool. So what I do now is I always record my sound checks.
Ah, cool idea. Yeah, you got a lot of songs that start with 1 2 1 2.
Right.
Yeah, It's funny you say that because I love that too. And I think regardless of the process, because I feel the same way. A lot of times I'm just creating something on my own, but I don't know. I mean, maybe some people do this and it's good to have discipline, but to just go, we're going to write a song right now, or I'm going to sit down and write a song. I don't feel like it always works that way. Sometimes it's just something pops in your head and you're like, oh, I got to sing these days. I got to sing into my phone. Or I heard about, once upon a time, guys calling their answering machine and singing a melody in their answering machine, or, you know what I mean? And and then you just kind of roll with that. But I always feel like if it's that, it just ideally it happens in a moment when you're inspired or something cool comes out and you roll with that and then come back to it. And a sound check or rehearsal in that sense is a great idea. Someone starts fucking around, oh, that's cool. And then something happens. And with the humdy-dums, I have plenty of songs that's what, we were just sort of jamming on something and I start humming nonsense, just for some melodic, ideas. And then I've actually gone back and been like, oh, it sounds like I'm saying Silent Lantern. Oh, okay. You know what I mean? And you just get random lyrics even sometime, at least for me, which I think is kind of cool. You hear yourself and go oh, it sounds like I said that. Well, that's kind of cool.
No, 100%.
But I love that.
The same process, because then it gets to the point of where you're going to go with this lyrically. Because I go through exactly what you do. You're jamming on something, and ooh da da do da ba ba do do do. Then a couple really stupid words come out, but they work phonetically with the melody. It's and it's I mean, how the hell am I going to come up with something cool that says oatmeal? And then I don't know if you get asked about the meaning of songs, but a lot of it is a stream of consciousness thing. And there'll be invariably a couple key words are going to pop out of this that just pop in your head.
Right.
We don't come up with this stuff. I think my theory is always that the universe gives us this, and we're just open and we channel it, and then we got to figure out what the hell we're going to do with this crazy random idea that just got dropped in our laps or into our guitars or into our vocal cords. So then the part of deciphering this and trying to turn it into something that makes lyrical sense, and sometimes the lyrics will seem perfectly coherent, and I'll written them and they'll turn into a song. They're on an album. And it isn't until 5 years later where I finally understand what the song was about.
Well, one cool thing about that too is I feel like I have some songs that are somewhat nonsensical, but phonetically cool. And I just I like certain bands that they don't always have to mean something. I don't have a preference one way or another. Some songwriters are great storytellers and they have, very specific lyrics that tell a story or whatever. And other songs are very kind of just abstract and weird. And either way, is it impacting you? Is it a good melody? That's what matters. And then what's cool though, is even sometimes if the artist writes a song and the lyrics are relatively nonsensical, maybe there's some, like you said, stream of consciousness or some thread that might be in there, at least in our heads. What's interesting is listening to other people interpret that, and then that they get impacted because they're going to interpret it that makes sense to them in their lives. And I think that's one really cool thing about music in general and lyrics too, is that it's unique for the listener, regardless of whatever was going on in the artist's head, right? So I think that's a really cool aspect of it as well.
Yeah, it's totally true because at the end of the day, when you're creating something, there's a certain point at which you just you put it out there, you let it go, and you let other people do with it what they want to do with it from the perspective of letting it impact them the way that it resonates with them. I remember reading this interview with Mick Jagger years ago, where he said something like he's just stopped explaining to people or just telling, whether it's interviews or whether someone is asking him, talking about what songs are about. Because for a lot of people, that ruins it. We've all grown up listening to something that we thought was super meaningful. So and so writing something about this torture, thing is like a tortured relationship with their best friend or something that resonated with you at the time, and it turns out to be about that their neighbor hates their dog or something like that.
Right.
Kills it for you.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, this song's about your pet. Oh, I thought it was about a breakup that I could relate to. Well, shit.
Yeah. Oh, I just want to pet all day long.
Yeah.
Sorry, you ran away.
So you've been, I mean, you said, like I said, you've been doing this a long time, and I mean, you've got a great catalog. You know, Vic and I usually discuss it briefly before, you know, just a few things before we get on. But like, you know, just immediately when I started listening to your songs, I was like, oh wow, yeah, this is really good. This is cool stuff. And I think, first of all, when did you get started as a musician? How did you get started? Early bands, early influences. Kind of tell us about that.
As a musician, I started playing. I played piano for several years as a child, from I don't know 8 to 11 or something like that for several years. But it wasn't. Yeah, at the time, it didn't speak to me simply because it was very much of a traditional. So I was born in Europe. First of all, I was born in Germany. Had very much of a traditional European upbringing as a kid. And there's and when I was taught to play piano, it was within that context. And at the time,
Beethoven sonatas exclusively.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it was classical, and it wasn't what resonated with me at the time. Although now, of course, I can kick myself 10 times over for not really diving into it further. But so much of what we take on is about how it's presented to us initially, and what we originally resonate with. Because a lot of things that all of us do in our lives, that had we gone into it or been introduced to it via a different path, we may not have embraced it the way we did. And so for me, piano, it just didn't that path didn't align. But what it did do is it embedded music in me, and that's probably five. And I took probably a 5-6 year break from it. Maybe when I was 17 or so, I'd rediscovered music, and kind of in the form of punk and post-punk. That was just part of the generation I was in at the time. And so I was really influenced by a lot of that, just this really energetic, pretty simple music that was just about attitude and about just touching, just all the type of things that push the button for like a teenager with too much energy that you don't know where to channel it. And that's kind of how I think that's probably what brought all three of us into it, early on in our lives. And then it started out with just playing with different cover bands, then starting to write on my own, starting to write with bands. I'd been in numerous bands, worked as a solo artist for a bit. And I guess that the challenge for me kind of when I tried to evolve out of playing kind of really simplistic punk / pop punk, post punk stuff, that was the real, that is kind of when grunge hit. Kind of in the early 90s. And then I guess I was in this period, that was the hardest period for me musically, because I felt like I was trying to record music that made sense relative to the sensibilities at the time, and it just didn't work. It's not that it was bad; it just wasn't true to my core. And so then I ended up. Then after that, I'd had some personal challenges. My father ended up having some health struggles for quite a period of time that he needed some help with. My daughter was born, so I had the responsibilities of a parent. So like all this time I was still writing and I was creating, but what I wasn't doing is putting out records and touring.
And this, you said, would have been in the 90s sort of era?
Kind of up through kind of the mid 2000s. Where I'm at that.
Well, your debut album with Love Crushed Velvet, is that 2010?
Yeah, that was 2010.
That right?
Yeah, and I'd started to get back into music around 2007 or so. I'd made a solo album with Sammy Marandino, who was a producer and Cyndi Lauper's drummer. And at the time, the studio band that we used, a great bunch of guys, or a great bunch of players, they weren't all available to do live shows and to tour and stuff. So the band that I ended up putting together to play live with had just kind of the energetic and stylistic center of gravity for that particular band was just really in such a different place than that specific A.L.X. solo album that I really started writing about. They did a great job playing those songs from the solo album, but in our jams, when we would all be hanging out playing, it was all the stuff that was coming out was in a very, very different musical direction. And based on that specific band, it really, I tailored my writing to them stylistically. Like, for example, the drummer that was playing with the time, Joan Jett's drummer, Thommy Price, who used to be with, who was with Billy Idol back in the Rebel Yell era, Jimi Bones, a guitar player, very, very much of a product of like old school rock and roll combined with post-punk. And that first record really reflects that, I think. It sounds very, it's almost sounds like a record you would have made in 1983, but with 2010 sensibilities and production styles around it. You know,
right. You're talking about the 2010 Love Crush Velvet record, or you're not talking about your solo record, right?
Solo record. I mean, the solo record.
I didn't know about that one. Is that one out like on digital platforms too? The A.L.X. one?
Out under A.L.X.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, that record's called No Eyes for the Future. And it was, I mean, I'm really happy with the record, really proud of the record, but it's a very different sound than what's ultimately become Love Crush Velvet.
Sure.
So that Love Crush Velvet sound that we came up with that original band back in 2010, that's kind of been in a lot of ways, it's set the musical template. And now it's really about trying to, with each record, how can we stay true to that core while still bringing freshness and new sensibilities to it?
Right. Yeah. Well, the names you mentioned, which I was going to mention, read a little bit on Wikipedia, and you got those. I mean, great. Obviously, playing with those players. Actually, I wanted to ask real quick. When was it? What time? When did you move to New York? Have you always lived in New York since you came to the U.S. from Germany, or?
No, I grew up. So I came over when I was super young. I was like 3 years old or so. I came with my parents.
Oh, okay.
An extra seat on the airplane on the way over. But grew up in more or less not in New York, but around New York. First,
okay.
Always about 45 minutes away from the city, and just close enough to be allured by the temptation, but far away enough to have it not be accessible at my fingertips, I guess. So,
yeah, sounds good.
I've always kept a footprint in New York, but I travel a lot, so it's never New York's. I can't say it's ever truly been fully home, but it's been kind of but I have tons of friends there. I still keep a place there. So but I spend most of my time between New York, Nashville, Kentucky.
Nashville for recording purposes and musicians.
I'm not doing so much there musically now. I was doing more there musically in the past, but I just ended up it's kind of a convenient home base. I have outside of my music life. I have a business in Western Kentucky, and so I jump back and forth between that and Nashville all the time. So,
oh wow, okay.
It's been Nashville kind of made sense that is a place to put down some roots. But musically, I actually don't do much in Nashville. Like I find it too. Nashville's this very weird paradox in that you've got so much talent and so many great musicians, but it's not. If you're trying to do interesting stuff, it's not necessarily the best place to be.
It's very geared towards. I would think they're very commercialized. Country pop, right? Very. It's very business minded, right? And so it's going to be commercialized.
100%.
Yeah.
It's a really.
They're not looking for the Mr. Bungles.
No. It's truly a music industry town. So it's very hyper professional. It's very product oriented. Like I do.
Yes.
So if I do, writing, it's almost like what the old Brill Building writing days would have been like. The Brill Building was basically this building in New York, which was just catered to songwriters and to cranking out products. So they'd write jingles, a lot of Lou Reed at one point, initially starting out, was a songwriter in the Brill Building. And the way those Brill Building, and this was obviously before any of our time, but what those sessions were generally like is they just put two songwriters in a room together and say, hey, you got an hour, you got 2 hours, this is what we need, let's see what you come up with. And
let the humdy-dumbing begin.
It is, yeah. And Nashville's like one of the things I really like doing is I call them my musician dinners, because outside of music, I like to cook and I like to drink wine. a glass of any good imbibement in front of me that isn't always going to stay safe and untouched. So,
some good food and good spirits always motivates. Or puts you to sleep, one or the other.
Yeah, but when we do these things, and sometimes it's people as musicians I know, and sometimes it's fresh faces that I invite over. So we all hang out, we cook, drink a little bit, and then we all end up jamming. And cool stuff always comes out of that. So the first time I did it in Nashville, and I had some great songwriters and players in the room, but they didn't know what to do with that kind of an experience because they're so used to being put in a room and saying, "Okay, now you're going to write, this Taylor Swift song? Well, switch the key, speed it up like 5 BPMs."
It's the stuff I always talk about. I always make this joke on the podcast about they've got guys in lab coats that are like, okay, here are the latest trends. And like, you got to have this BPM at this exact mark. It's got to go to a key change bridge. And then it's got to have, it's very, like you said, I forget how you put it, but you put it perfectly.
Yeah.
It's product based. And it's like, this is like what we do. So you come in with something outside that box, I think, and it's a bit like, whoa, so you don't want me to use a Telecaster,
and it's like it's so regimented in that sense. And guys, their initial look is like, "Hey, are we on the clock?" And I'm like, "No, man, we're hanging out. This ain't about that."
Right.
Even though we might end up coming up with something much cooler than when you're off the clock. But like with a lot of the Nashville players, they're so skilled. But a lot of times when I'm in the studio with them, they've got to at first. When you're asking them to play a part, first they got to check all the boxes for all the stuff that they feel they're supposed to be playing, and then you say now come up with something cool and crazy and wild, and that's when good stuff happens. Versus when you're doing it. Well, the reason why I do like to create in New York is more things are a little more freeform. Like New York's a horrible city to build up a fan base. Because there's just so much competition for people's attention. But it is a great place to create.
I feel the same about Austin in a sense. It's very, very saturated, and there's a lot of maybe not a lot. There's a lot of fluff and stuff, but there's also an immense pool of talent and so much underground stuff, that's just like mind blowing, fantastic musicians around every corner. And the thing I like about Austin, it doesn't have the business. It's not the business mecca that Nashville has always really been, and is such a titan now. And of course, New York and LA still, but it has, I think, the creative energy of the town is really exceptional. I do love that about Austin. And I feel like it is a little more open, and receptive to very creative ideas. And that's one thing I have found that I really enjoy working. It sounds like you've done it a ton, which is great, but working with different musicians, that's something I really enjoy, featuring different musicians, having my friends play on my records, doing, make guest appearance on theirs, etc. And then you just get different people's energy and creativity, and it's all, to me, so much of it is just vibe and comfort, right? And a guy cutting the bullshit and the egos. And once everyone can just, like you said, you're not on the clock, you're not thinking in those terms, and get rid of ego business, all that, and just create something and try to make some genuine art. And that's something I love. And to another point you said, it's great. Sometimes we all need that. And, whether it's a producer, the engineer, or whoever, just going, getting you outside of your own head and your own box. Because as a trained musician, I don't subscribe to the I don't want to learn music theory because it stifles me. I'm a music teacher and a big snob, not a snob, but I mean, I don't subscribe to that shit. However, it is important sometimes to just, you gotta force yourself to get away from your own habits, because we all develop habits and patterns and licks and tricks, and so sometimes it is nice when someone's, like you said, when someone can just get outside of that space that they're used to and do something creatively different, and you get some really interesting magic. I think that's like some of my personal favorite guitar solos or whatever I may have done is when I was put in that place, and then I walk out going, wow, that was cool. That's not something I normally would have. You need people to push you sometimes, I think, and it's healthy and good, creates better art, better music.
No, 100%. That's where the role of having a producer comes in too. When you're in the studio,
100%.
It sounds like you've been doing this for a long time too. And yes, in theory, we can be the producer on our own albums, and in the end, we're all kind of co-producers from a creative input perspective. But you do need. I've always found it's really important to have a producer who's there to kind of call you on your bullshit, but more than anything else, to just give you a different perspective and give you different songs. And that's what's it just at the end of the day, that's where a lot of the interesting ideas, the interesting approaches are going to come from. Right.
It doesn't need to be many people, and I don't know, Nashville's probably again maybe somewhat like this, and I know a lot in the hip hop world, particularly, sometimes you see 4,000 fucking co-writers and producers on a song that has a bunch of people going and you're like, really, you needed 40 people to write that? But like, you don't need that many people. You just need a competent engineer, producer, the artist, 3 or 4 heads tops, I think, right? And as long as everyone is in the same creative space and not competing with each other and all have the end game and the goal and understand what the artist is trying to do, I think that's where really cool stuff. And I hear that in your music, because it sounds very professional. And it's what I like too is it's different. It's not like I'm listening. Oh, it's a lot of stuff. It's like it's this song again, right? Yeah. You've done a good job of creating, like you said, you have a sound. And, you stay within the parameters of a certain sound. You're not going, crazy out on a limb, but every song is different and interesting in of its own right. And I always like a lot of the songs. I haven't listened to all of your songs, but a lot of times I'm listening and I'm just like, even if I'm casually listening, I like the fact that I'm always getting caught by interesting things. Ooh, that was an interesting turn. That was an interesting chord progression. That's a cool melody. Like, so anyway, I think it's, you can tell that an experienced songwriter, and when it's being produced well, right? You get all those ingredients and elements. And I think as a musician, I might notice it more, but as a listener, I think those things subconsciously impact you. And great producers and songwriters, regardless of genre, are certainly aware of those elements, right? And I think they come through. Let's talk about. Oh, actually, so you played piano, and then when did you start playing guitar? Like around the time you just kind of started singing and getting into punk rock. I also want to know what your definition of post-punk is. Right, explain that to us. What is post-punk?
You can date it or you can stylize out. So when I think of post-punk, I would think. So I look at post-punk as stuff that was being made, I'd say like probably from 1980 to 1983, 1984. Like you listen to like the early U2 records, I'd consider post-punk. Like some of the stuff by the Stranglers, I'd consider post-punk. Billy Idol, post-Generation X, post-punk. Early Blondie albums, bands like The Talking Heads.
Punk rock attitude, but with more pop sensibilities, a little more mainstream. Is that kind of
like a little less angsty? Kind of straddling that bridge. Where, when you went from punk into new wave. Some of the bands that in this, like I consider the Police to be post-punk. For example, where they had this this kind of like punkish attitude. They threw in reggae. There's the rockers. I mean, those guys had a high degree of musicianship. All 3 of them.
Yeah, very eclectic. Yeah, but that's interesting because I wouldn't have initially thought that, but I do see that thread now that you bring that up.
Well, I would even consider like Depeche Mode to be post-punk.
When did Depeche Mode start anyway?
They were kind of. Here, but I always think of them as being like early 80s.
Okay. I need to get more into Depeche Mode. So I think some of these. Let me look here. I'm going to Wikipedia because these are guys you've worked with. Oh, British producer and engineer. How do you say his name? Dave Bascombe.
Dave Bascombe. Yeah.
Bascombe. Tears for Fears, Depeche Mode, The Human League, I guess would be another one. Those all sound like great examples. Erasure, like Placebo, like. And did you seek that out when you went to kind of work with these particular musicians, producers, were you kind of going, which makes sense, right? This is this vibe that I've kind of found where I feel like I fit, and let me go find guys, or was it just a coincidence? Like how did you cultivate these relationships and work with these particular producers and musicians?
So it depends with Yeah, so with some of it is people I've sought out purposely. Others are ones that have. Am I freezing up? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
No, yeah, you're good.
Yeah, you're good.
So it really depends. So with Dave Bascombe, I'd always liked Dave's work. I was looking for our first album. I was trying to find the right mixer, and there were 3 or 4 that I'd reached out to, and so at that point it was just based on whose sound I thought would be a good fit. And a couple of them were tied up; they didn't have the time. A couple of them were just out of the budget that we had. It turned out Dave Bascombe, who's got, and I mean, you just read off some of the acts that he's worked with. Great mixer. He was into the music, and he had a free slot at the time. So in his case, he's the one that ended up mixing it with. As far as the producers on that album, because we had several producers, and a couple of them that worked with, like Roger Greenawalt, that worked with years and years ago on some solo work back in the 1990s. So he did a couple tracks on that. Darren Korb was a new guy that I just met through some mutual friends who did some work on that as producers. So that's how those came about. And then since then, the follow-up album of that, I'd worked with David Maurice, who's and he also produced this album, the new album. That's first of all the song "The Future" that you guys probably just heard, and the whole Souls in the Barren Heart album. And I came across David through a mutual musician friend. David had produced some of this guy's stuff. I said, "Hey, this guy's really good. Can you connect us?" And so David ended up doing an EP called Delusions.
Right. Okay. 2013.
Yeah. And so and David's English, and we got on real well from a creative perspective. We were both pretty strong-willed people, and he's good at calling me on my shit. And so, I kind of with producers, you kind of got to know when to dig in and when to listen, and understand that they probably do know better most of the time, but not all the time. So we've become good friends over the years too. So he's got, and so I did this new one with David as well. And I give him a ton of credit for it because he had the crop of songs that we brought in at the time. I'd started, and Skunk, you can appreciate this. You go through sometimes you write songs extremely simply in terms of chord progressions, and sometimes it's chord hopscotch. We have so many chords. There's so much chord movement going on within the songs. And I was so for these songs on the Souls album that's coming out now, I'd made them super super chordy, and I was really proud of all these interesting changes I came up with and everything like that. And then when David and I are going through pre-production, he's like, "Hey man, the songs are good, the melodies are good, the choruses are good, and everything like that, but you just have too many chords going on here." And so he just stripped these. I mean, this was basically, he just took a machine gun to all these things.
Right.
And this was like a major culling of the herd. So yeah, musically.
Are you? And this is on your new album or on the Delusions EP that you're talking about?
The song
the upcoming, right?
Pretty close to what they're
the
on the new one that's
album
coming out now. Yeah.
I got
approach of keeping it super, super, super simple from a chord structure. Again, the melodies and everything stayed pretty much intact. The core chords did. But he created this very, very broad, open template to, and his theory behind it, let's give the musicians space to interpret.
Right.
And at the end of the day, it was a great move because I think that decision more than anything else creatively helped created the foundation for the album sound, because the players we had were just they weren't just great players. We had a really good working chemistry as far as just kind of we're all sonically on the same page, and it just came together very, very easily. And I think a lot of that was because of David really pushing hard to keep this very open structure as far as not having all these chords and changes and structural aspects that really boxed in the musicians.
Right, yeah. It's interesting. something I feel like I learned, and I'm sure it's different for everybody, but I feel like when I was younger and I just couldn't really write songs, and like you said, you started in cover bands, and it makes sense. Like some people are just, really can just write a damn great song right out the box, I guess. Like I feel like it wasn't me. Like I could write some okay stuff, but I think I overly complicated things, and I see that. I think it's typical a lot of times with younger guys, especially if you're like a metal dude or something. It's riffs, and you got riffs. And I wanted to use every chord I had ever learned, and it's like, and I even in a jamming context with certain musicians, and granted, I have some cool back catalog stuff in that kind of vein, but sometimes you go, well, great. Now where is, like you said, you had already had melodies for this or whatever, but oftentimes it's like, all right, well, how the hell do we put a melody? Where's the room for the catchy part of the song, right? And it's all, intent, or, if you're writing math, prog rock, whatever, right? But I mean, so I learned, like, now it's like the whole KISS thing, right? Keep it simple, stupid. And you're like, yeah, well, 3 chords works. You don't have to have more. You can do all kinds of different neat little tricks, and which is great, and you should. But it doesn't always have to be that way. And so many times now, I think, on a lot of my favorite songs and songwriters, and as a teacher musician, like that's what fascinates me so much about music. When you actually going back to classical and stuff, and you analyze, there's a lot of icing on the cake and a lot going on, but a lot of classical stuff, at its core, great melodies and whatever, 3 chords, 4 chords, and that goes through all these different genres. And so I see a common thread in that, and then you can build that to no end. You can produce it to no end, and you can layer it and do anything over the world over those 3 chords, so to speak. But I think that's the thing I had to learn, right? And so again, the value of producers, and kind of sometimes having someone that can recognize when, hey, this is cool. Like, let's have all this in here, but maybe not. Let's maybe not have this all. You're at the context of what you're trying to accomplish. But it was funny when you were saying, like, I used to, there were so many songs in the past, right? It was just like, do I really need to play this much shit in this song, Yeah,
it's hard. It is about what you're trying to accomplish. So you get...
Yeah.
You see this with a lot of different instrumentalists. I mean, with guitar players in particular, like certain genres of music where the guitar players, it's all about showing what they got. Which
I think you got to get that shit out of your system. Some guys never do. And it is contingent on what your style is and who I get that. But yeah, I remember playing, a Zakk Wylde solo over a Hootie and the Blowfish type song. That's ridiculous. It's context, right? But whether you admit it to yourself or not, it's like there's an ego of, look what I can do. It's like, yeah.
And for the great players who really just want to riff out,
Oh, there's a place, and I love it. I love that music, but I do think the greats. I think there's always soul and melody in songs, always, right? Even when you can shred and do all kinds of cool. I mean, at least that's a personal choice, and that's what I like to listen to. Like, I'm all about musicality and melting my face and doing cool stuff, but in the right spot, pick the moments, and melody and song. And I resonate with guys across the board of any genre. I think that have that. I just think it's a natural inclination to move that direction. It's either maybe a inherent thing for certain artists and musicians to a certain degree, just like improvisation, but maybe not to a lot of people, but it is to some. And then also just, but a sense of, but also over time you learn to write in, melodies and grooves and so, I don't know. I lost my train of thought there. But man, I think, that's a fascinating thing. And I know you've been on that journey like any musician, and it's cool to see yourself get better. Right. And, I mean, not that you or anyone else doesn't have, great stuff on from the get go, but I think you just get wiser and more streamlined, right? And just kind of, again, I think accepting working with producers because you know the value, and like you said, knowing when to say, knowing when to dig in, and knowing when okay, this is I should probably listen right now, right?
Yeah. And
I wanted to talk. Go ahead, man.
It's about when we're young and we start out, we all think we know better, and we're very
yeah.
But sometimes we're very stubborn about our vision. I see this with my daughter, who's really she's 20 now. She's an excellent. She truly is very, very talented in terms of as a writer, and her sensibilities. Stuff just comes to her that I sometimes wish I'd written myself. But I see her.
Right.
And to her credit, she will ask me to help her out with stuff. So she is. I think she's got enough wisdom to at least ask for the advice of somebody who's been doing this for a while. But I still see some of that stubbornness that we all have in ourselves. But the nice thing about being a musician versus being an athlete, once you hit 40 as a musician, you're more experienced, and in a lot of ways, you should be in a position to be at the top of your craft and still have room for all. Versus
Agreed.
40 as an athlete, Tom Brady notwithstanding. That's a young person's game.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, thank God we don't have those timeline constrictions. I feel like I would have just been starting when people were retiring. I think I figured it out, and now all my body is shattered, which it is. But I don't need to run around and throw a football, so I'm good.
It's so great. One of the things I'm trying to do more of now is just go see some of the artists who've been who are really up there in the years now, the ones that are in their 60s, 70s. Because for a musician who in their late 60s, that's, you don't know how long they're going to be around. That's not very old for people who have relatively healthy lifestyles and stuff. But if you're 67, 68 and living the lifestyle that people did back in their 20s during that era, kind of the mid, something like that. That's a lot of wear and tear on the system. And like, for example, I'd never seen Tom Petty before because I was always somewhere else when he was playing in my hometown. And I finally got to see him like 6 months before he passed. And I'm thinking, like, thank God I got to see him.
Yes. Yeah, he's one of my all-time favorite songwriters. I love
good.
Tom Petty. It's funny you cite Tom Petty, man, because and that is so interesting that you said that, because your music, I wouldn't suspect, or I didn't go into it thinking this, I was thinking, whatever, punk, post-punk is what I expected. And I had to ask you, what is post-punk? And I definitely see that aspect of your music. And like you said, in the aspects of the angst, maybe when you were younger. I mean, I can see the lineage somewhat, but there's so much more to it, obviously. And actually something that hit me, and I even think I told Vic this, I was like, man, it's kind of got, I don't think I used the word post-punk, but, that little bit of punk rock and roll, kind of the new wave, all those elements in there. But I was like, but it's almost like got some Tom Petty kind of vibe in there too, man. And there's something about the songwriting which is a huge compliment coming from me, by the way, because I'm a huge Tom Petty fan. And to your point, thank God I saw him at a festival many, many years ago, but his last tour, I was like, it's expensive and I don't know. And didn't go. And then Tom Petty was not that old, man, right? I don't even think he was 60. That was just devastating. And then, this happens all the time. So whether someone's 70 or 80 or 40, it's like you should take that opportunity, I think, because you might not get it again. But also to your point, it's kind of crazy. I just saw the Scorpions for the first time ever, and I was blown away. And speaking of Mick Jagger, it's like these guys are in their 70s. So anytime people are like, oh, you see the memes, and when you're 30 at a concert and I'm 40 and I'm too old I'm like, fuck off. Like, go watch the Rolling Stones, man. These guys are dinosaurs. And they've got Mick Jagger's more freaking energy than your teenage football player's son. It's nuts.
No, it's true.
Or Iggy Pop, whatever.
No, you got to do it. Like I saw Nick Cave for the first time a few months ago, and when he was in New York, I was like, when you're moving around a lot, traveling, playing, and it's a lot of times you just don't have the opportunity to see these people because they're not in town when they're coming through. So I got to see Nick. He was great. Just trying to get in as many as I can right now. And a lot of them they're not playing huge. They're not playing. They're the Stones, obviously, notwithstanding, or the Scorpions. When you go to Eastern Europe, they're probably still playing stadiums. But a lot of these acts, they're playing small venues. You can get tickets. Tickets aren't cheap now, unfortunately, for anything. But you got to get them while you can. Yeah,
I've been fortunate on some of these concerts. I I had some opportunities where I didn't, have to spend that kind of money. But unfortunately, that's the reason. Like, I haven't seen the Stones, and at a certain point, I'm kind of going, like you said, sometimes you have obligations and stuff on your calendar, you can't do it. But there are those moments like, damn it, just pay the money. It's the freaking Rolling Stones, and I hope I get to see them, and we've all got that. You can't catch everybody, but I never got to see the original Pink Floyd. I say the original, but even the Waters Gilmore Pink Floyd with Richard Wright and all that. But even seeing Roger Waters was just doing the wall, just blew my head off, man. It was incredible, and it's like, those are the kind of concerts just you gotta go to, man. If you can, if you're free.
Get it.
Let's talk about the new album. The new album drops when? It's coming up real soon here, right?
I think the date's July 17th. It's basically
July 17th.
We're a month out right now.
And your single, which you mentioned, and I can't remember things, so I'm going back and looking at The Future, right? The Future. Cool song and really cool video. Tell us about this 3D video, man. That thing is awesome.
Oh, yeah, that's killer.
So a couple of years ago, a friend of mine and I were a great musician, and we were trying to figure out how the struggle that we all have is as musicians is how to take a different approach to how we present our music in a way that not everybody is doing, and then it's hard because there's been a lot of people have been really creative in how they put their stuff out there. And I'd had this idea about trying to do something in virtual reality sitting in the back of my head for a year or two. And then my friend Kevin as it turns out, he was doing some work in this space as well. And so we said, and this goes back to 2018, I think. And so we said, let's find some digital artists and make some music videos in virtual reality. And initially we talked about doing a whole album in virtual reality. And but just the time, budget, and then just finding digital artists who could actually do this was hard. I mean, now fast forward to 2022, you've got the metaverse and everybody's talking about it. But back in 2018, finding a digital artist who could make a music video in virtual reality, I mean, good luck. I mean, we literally scoured the earth for this.
Wow.
And we ended up finding a couple great ones. And this one we did with a Swedish guy named Ellis Ekdahl. And at that point, trying to find a single platform to do this with was challenging. The digital design platforms were really glitchy. But for me, this felt like being there in 1981 when the idea of MTV came out.
Totally new, cutting edge.
Totally new thing. And then back then, I mean,
yeah.
But still, it was like, hey, music videos. Wow.
Right.
This is interesting. And now I see what all my favorite artists look like and how they act and how they perform and how they stylize themselves. But a really great music video, it's shot and it's edited for that specific medium. A great music video can take a decent song and make it much better. And a good song and make it great. Because it becomes this two-dimensional experience. You have it in front of you on the screen and you hear it sonically. And when it's edited well and when it's directed well, etc., it can take a song to a whole different place. And so the idea of doing this in virtual reality was like, that to me seemed like the next frontier. And I don't know if either of you guys have an Oculus headset, or any of the virtual reality headsets, but if you watch the Future video in, like when I first saw what Ellis had sent over, I was like, holy shit, this is fucking cool.
It's really, I hadn't seen anything like it, man. So and now you're talking about actually watching it in the virtual reality realm. I mean, it's cool just to watch two-dimensionally, on YouTube or what, right? Just, on your screen, but you're talking about actually this thing you're in it, right? Basically is the idea.
Yeah, like you take that two-dimensional
and you turn around. You're the one walking around in the video, basically.
That's awesome. That two-dimensional experience, and it's just like, puts it on steroids. And the cool thing about it is that, when you watch the same music video over and over again, you're seeing all these different things on the screen in front of you. But when you're doing it, the way we edit it in VR, and I think we're the first band in the world that's done this. There are others that have done it now, but when we first made it back then, I mean, nobody I know was in this space, and nobody I know knows anybody that was doing what we were doing back then. So that's kind of cool in and of itself. I don't want to.
Yeah, very cool, man.
We were the first in the world because somebody else might have done it, but I don't know any.
You're definitely you're definitely on the forefront, man.
But the way
this is new technology.
We edited it specifically to make it so that you're seeing something new every time watching the video. Because when you see it, one thing, when you turn to your left, you've got this going on, and it's not even interactive yet. And the next phase, it was just like making it interactive would have been too expensive at the time. The technology has become cheaper, and we want to start looking at doing that. But so for us, it was super exciting working like this because we really feel like we've taken our music and we've put it into a whole new realm that you're just scratching the surface on at this point.
Yeah, I mean, because now you're, like you said, it's always moving, right? First there was radio, and then there was music videos, and now it's like you're always going like, especially now when everyone's got no attention span, like how do you immerse the listener? I keep hearing more and more, I was just at the NAMM show and about the 360 spatial audio and they're starting to remix stuff and all this spatial audio, and now the 3D video fully immersive listening and viewing experience for the listener. So they're actually in that world and not surfing, but immersed with the artist, which is fantastic. Because outside of a concert, it almost seems like that aspect of that has been lost. Where once upon a time, I think putting on the radio or putting on MTV, you were in that world. You weren't distracted by your cell phone and whatever other billion cat videos were on it, YouTube and all these kind of things. So it's really cool, man. And look, I didn't even realize this. You have another 3D video. Is this right for the Light Inside?
The Light Inside. Yeah. So we worked with a guy with a Dutch digital artist named Martin Nebelong, who's is a super talented guy, and he's been doing a lot of work on this platform called Dreams. So because they're different, like in the same way, like when you're in the recording studio, you got Pro Tools, you've got Logic, you got Digital Performer, and it's in different outlets that you can work within. So doing design, when you're in the virtual reality / digital design space, you've got different platforms as well. So Martin did this one in a platform called Dream. We released that one a year ago. That's going to be on the new album, and we felt like I was like, like I'm sitting on this really interesting visual content, and it's just kind of stupid to not be releasing it. And so we put that one out, and then the next single off the album after is called it's called Sad and Dies, which is also my favorite track on the new record, and that one is in VR as well. We'd worked with a digital artist out of Miami on that one, and that one's got some really cool stuff going on in it too. And the nice thing about it is all three of these videos, the visual feel of them is totally different. So when you put on that and you're watching the future, you're just being barraged by this super high-tech, aggressive, pyrotechnic, coordinated assault on your senses versus the Light Inside, which is more, it has this more dreamy quality to it. And Sad and Eyes it's got a whole other feel to it. It's really fun working in these things.
Yeah, man, really, really cool. I mean, I imagine these videos take quite a while to do.
It's a lot of work, but But at the end of the day, if it gives you, once you get the result you want, it's just, you don't get bored of them.
No, God, no. Like, man, and your videos, again, haven't explored them all, but I've watched a handful. And I mean, so you had several singles, and you just said The Light Inside is going to be on the new record. Any of these other singles? You had Free, Rise Up. I love that song, Rise Up. All these songs are really cool. Firefly, I think, was off an album, right?
Yeah, Firefly.
But you have a lot of different videos. Any of the other songs that have been singles going to be on the new album too, or those just were those standalones?
Yeah, because we've kind of so the album we recorded in 2014, like that. So, I mean, I'm an idiot for sitting on these as long as I did, but I did. So, but we did.
You can blame the pandemic at least. You know what I mean? I kind of went through the same thing. You know, it was kind of a hard time to, I think, release and tour or do anything. So it made sense, I think, but to your credit, I think putting out these singles, it's not like it's been completely off the grid or idle, because, you've consistently been putting out these fantastic, singles along with videos. So
also back
I think it's cool, man.
Around 2015, the music paradigm, the music industry paradigm, it looked like it was moving away from the album and more towards the single, like almost back the way it was back in the 1950s, when artists, bands, acts would put albums out, it was almost kind of an afterthought because it was all about the single. And so we had this album, which was really just recorded and intended to be released as an album, because it really is. I can honestly say it's a very cohesive body of work that fits together, and that ran up against that mindset back in 2015, where it looked like music was moving towards a singles culture, and the album was moving towards irrelevance. And so that's why we ended up releasing a few songs ahead of time. So the first one we did was Other Places, where we got a video for that one. The next one was Free, which you'd mentioned, which my good friend Bill Goins had shot and directed the video for. And then The Light Inside, which we did last year, that was the next one. And then it's The Future, which is out now, of course, and then Saddened Eyes, which is going to be out in another 2 months or so. And that's probably going to be it for singles.
Rise Up, is that on the record?
Rise Up is an old tune. That's on that A.L.X. album that I made back with Sammy Marandino in 2007. And that was...
oh, wow. I love that song.
Yeah, thanks.
Man.
Well, there are two versions of it. There's the one that we did with Sammy and the band. Then there's a remix that we did a couple years later that we just tried to... with any song, if you like the song, you can approach it any number of ways. So it just seemed at this time like there was all that stuff going on in the Middle East with the Arab Spring, and you kind of in certain parts of the world, a revolution seemed like it was in the air. So this was an opportunity to take that old song, and that's what when I wrote the song, it was really about that kind of about revolution anyway, and this whole thing of kind of breaking free from oppression and snapping your shackles in half as societally and rising up. So I was sitting in a hotel room in Berlin while all this stuff was going on in the Arab Spring, and I said, "Hey, let's do something let's do a remix on the song and re-release it." So what that video was based on was that remix.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. I know you got to go, man. We could definitely keep talking. I feel like we've just skimmed the surface, dude. Thanks so much for spending the time with us. I wanted to bring up one more thing that I got a kick out of. And I had listened to the song, but then just today I was kind of combing through a couple of the videos and because I'd watched the VR ones, but like the holiday song you did in that video is hilarious. With the reindeer, I love that, man. That's just kind of a fun holiday type thing that you did. Who did that video?
That one was that was a young guy at the time, and so the whole story behind that was a good friend of mine and a guy that I was doing a lot of writing work with. We were, this a good 10 years ago, at least at this point, we're sitting around, and this would have been like beginning of November of that year, or middle of November. And we said, hey, let's write a holiday tune just for the fun of it. And so we started playing around with it a bit. And like, how it is sometimes, some songs just come out super fast. And so in like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, we had the bones of this thing. And we had to we liked the verse, we liked the basic chorus idea. And so I call up David Maurice and I say, hey, David, what do? You got anything going on in the next couple of days? And he's like, no, you have to have some free time to schedule. Like, hey, so we got a holiday. So Jay and I rewrote this holiday tune. And we want to go in the studio and we want to track it because we think it's pretty good. So went over to David's place. We just pulled out a couple guitars, tweaked out, played around with the arrangement a little bit, and we want to get this thing out like super pronto because I mean we're talking about mid-November and holiday season's coming up. So we couldn't get the players we wanted together to do this thing live. So we said, let's see if we can find something from an old recording session where we can use the drums. So we had this song off Delusions called Revolution Time. And so we took the drums off of that. We looped it, programmed.
That's amazing.
Yeah, like who'd have thunk it, right? And then went in with Jay. And I think Jay, David, and myself played everything in the course of a couple hours. Put down, laid the vocals down, mixed it. I literally, between when we wrote it and when we finished it and mixed it was like 4 days. And then and this was Thanksgiving weekend coming up. And we said, the song needs a video. But how do you, who's... And everybody said, you're crazy to try to make a video. Everybody's gone over Thanksgiving. People are with their families. They've got this stuff going on. And I said, I'm sure that somebody is stuck somewhere at home. They either can't go see their families or they broke up with their significant other. But there's got to be like some creative artist
some depressed creative person that needs the work to take their mind off their shitty holiday right now.
You think, Thanksgiving, there's like nothing going on. If you're
right
at home over Thanksgiving break, you've got nothing to do. So put out a quick ad on Craigslist, looking for illustrator or somebody who can create a cool digital music video fast and cheap. So a couple of them. So I saw Pete's work, and it was really, I liked his sensibilities, and he was very clever. So we're going back and forth over Thanksgiving break. He'd send me this, he'd send me that, and that's where the video came out of. We just said, hey, let's make this like a little bit of a fun, cute, irreverent, rock and rollish holiday song that's a little tongue in cheek and family friendly, but that still doesn't blow our cred out of the water.
No, I like it because it's still on brand, but it's fun, right? And it's just a cool little departure, and that's a nice thing about sometimes I'm like, God, there's too many holidays getting in the way of things. So cynical, I guess, but it's nice when you can utilize them as an artist sometimes, right? And do something fun like that.
We had a great time with it. And it's something, and it just goes to that whole idea of just running with a whim if you've got it. Sometimes you just don't overthink stuff. Put it out there, and just let it just course its way through the universe and see where it lands.
Yeah, you never know who's going to find it. Anything could lead someone to the rest of the stuff. So, I play in one particular band that has done that does original music for silent films, but also has done like rearranged versions of Tchaikovsky's 1812. They used to perform that all the time, and every time the holiday season comes around, man, those Spotify plays spike. I think it's people are seeking that kind of thing at that time of year.
You'll be relevant for exactly 17 days of the year.
Exactly. That's just it. It's like, please listen to something other than 1812 Overture. Or, I'm sorry, not 1812, freaking Nutcracker. Anyway, so July 17th is the record. What is the name of the new album again?
Souls and the Barren Heart.
Okay, cool. Souls in the Barren Heart, coming out July 17th. And the new video, which will drop right about that time too, correct? Or
the video for the future is out. That dropped a couple days ago.
Oh, but there's the next, didn't you say there was another one coming?
One is Sad and Dies, and that's going to be, that's going to drop sometime. It won't drop it'll probably drop sometime late July or so.
Okay, great. So Sadden video followed with the album. And last thing, like you said, you travel a lot. And one thing I noticed on your website was from tour dates. There's a lot of, you've been all over the world, man, international dates. You were even in South Korea, Seoul. You were, obviously Europe, different spots in the U.S. So do you do a lot of select type gigs, festival type stuff? It looks like there's some very select sort of shows that you've played. I like the thing I guess you're doing here in Italy soon, right? A lot of that kind of, how do these gigs come about?
So the one-offs, a lot of it is, in some of these places I've got reasons outside of music for being there. maybe not a specific town, but somewhere nearby. So so the ones in Asia we did a couple of, like, literally this was right before COVID. This was like November, might have been December 2019. I can't remember exactly. I had to be in Asia, and so I just through some people I know, they'd gotten in touch with a couple of venues and said, "Hey, A.L.X is going to be over there. Love Crush Velvet. He doesn't have his band, but he'll be available on X dates. You guys got an opening." And so we found a couple of venues. One in Tokyo, one in Seoul, where they said, "Hey, yeah, we like the music. Bring them in." And those were dates where I just didn't have time to work with a local band and to get them rehearsed. So I just did them as solo acoustic shows. The one in Italy came out through my artist rep right now, who's got a relationship with a venue where they do these. The one coming up in Italy in July, where he's got a relationship with a venue. It's a cool space. They like the music. It was easy for me to get there because I'm going to be in Europe anyway then, so I just had to move a couple of dates around to make that happen. Some of the Australian tour, we ended up getting sponsored. So we were there for a couple of weeks playing the entire country. And
that's amazing. I was going to ask about that. Yeah, very cool.
So we found some sponsorship because some folks had come across a few of our songs. They really liked it. So there was a whole campaign set around that. So a lot of it is just about, some of it we seek out, some of it comes to us.
Mm-hmm. Very cool, man. Yeah. Looking over, it's really cool. All these different places.
Yeah, it's all at the end of the day. It's all about looking for reasons to say yes.
Last question. I'm sorry. Did you do a Beatles set? I saw something about a Beatles something. It says Love Crush. Oh no, sorry. That's with you guys with somebody with the Beatles complete.
Yeah.
On ukulele. Oh, that was you played South by. You played South by in 2011.
Was it that long ago?
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said that's the last time I was doing
stuff. Like, did we? You're like, yeah, I hated that place.
Yeah, done stuff in South by in past years as well. I don't know if I put it on the website. But at that point, South by had gotten. It was just so crowded; it becomes such a shit show. And this is when interactive and
it still is.
Well, it's only gotten worse. But so I was there with a friend of mine happened to be there, who's a pretty big A&R guy with a major label back at the time, and he was and so he was going to see one of his acts, and he couldn't even get into the venue to see his act.
Oh my God! Wow, yeah.
So
it is a total shit show,
and at that point,
yeah, this is so much more to talk about. Look at this ending on the as we do our podcast from Austin. We're like, South by is a shit show. Yeah, it's absolute chaos. Like, people who live in Austin, unless you're part of the festival, everyone's like, I want to be nowhere near downtown. I want nothing to do with that because it is. I was actually involved this year in a press capacity, which I've never been. I've performed down there, not as an official artist, but I've always, like, many years I would perform multiple bands, multiple shows. You're running around, you're hauling. It's a lot, and the parking and all that. I mean, if you can at least get artist parking, that helps, but that's kind of rare even too. But this year I was down in a different capacity and was really trying to network with some artists and stuff from the press aspect and for the podcast and whatnot, which was fantastic. But I was so like, God, I do not want to go down there and deal with parking and deal with all these crowds and all that stuff, man. So, that's part of biting the bullet, though, right? Like, going to see a concert, sometimes you got to just go, well, all right, it's going to suck. I just got to go do it, and I'll be glad I did. But A.L.X., I know you got to go, man. We could definitely keep chatting. Thank you so much for making the time. Like, I think I can speak for Vic and I both. I think really enjoy your music, and the videos are fantastic. Just congrats on everything you're doing as an artist, man. I'm definitely a fan. And yeah, it's been great talking.
Yeah, thanks,
to you,
guys. Really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all, and would love to hear some of your stuff sometime too. So shoot it on over.
Yeah, for sure, man. Would love to stay in touch. Have a great trip over to Italy. Looking forward to the new album, and we'll be in touch. Hang out, though, for just a sec while we sign off, so we make sure all this uploads. I always forget to say that on the front end. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom, Vic?
Yeah, man. Kiss. Keep it simple, stupid.
There you go. Till next time, Skunk Manhattan. Yeah. Victor Ramos, keep it simple, stupid, and take care.
Hey, folks, that concludes another episode of the podcast. Guest links will be available in the show notes. We'd like to thank our friends at Top Shelf Music for showcasing the podcast on their site. Be sure and check them out at topshelfmusicmag.com for the latest music news, reviews, and events. We'd also like to thank the folks over at Tragan Guitars, Godin Guitars, Ernie Ball Strings, and 5 Iron Woodworks. Have a great week, and catch you on the next one.